Hi everyone, this is the bonus coloring video for the Paper Escape with OLO markers for August 2026. And this is the botanical brush set. It's not the one that I use in my class, so I thought I'd make some combinations with it as well. And then this is the botanical brush set that I used for my class. So we're going to combine these two, and I like to have them off screen in these fun little silicone kind of holders, and they're good to keep the markers open and standing up the whole time. So I'm going to get started with the flower first. So I'm using the Botanicals brush set, and this is the R5.3. And I'm just going to start with the same kind of technique from my class. I'm just going to start with this darker color, and I'm just flicking out, putting where I think the dark elements would be for the flower, taking my time trying to figure this out, right? So it's always a discovery sometimes, and you can always try again. So this is my kind of sample sheet that I made that I ended up using for the ephemera that is going to be on sale on Lynn's website. So if you don't want to color all of the different images, or you like the way I colored it, you can just download it and print it out and have it ready to go. Or you can follow this video and color them yourselves. So just going around in a circle, and I'm just rotating my sheet around. You saw where the flower petals kind of fold over a little bit. I made those dark. The one that folded over a little more, I'm going to let it get a little brighter to have that highlight of the color. Just kind of working around, and you can get that dimension too if you kind of go around and let the outside edges also kind of curve up a little more with the dark shade. Kind of gives it that kind of round kind of feel, like it's a curved petal is what I'm going for there. And then I like the image kind of shows, using those lines. So then this is the V1.1, and it doesn't actually go right next to it on the color wheel, but as you can see, it actually adds a nice blending to it. So it gives it that dark, but then it kind of, so it has like a dark pink, and then we're pulling out into kind of a violet. And so this can kind of happen in real flowers, right? Where they kind of vary from pink to a purple, or yellow to an orange, things like that. So this to me kind of looks realistic. So I like this color. I'm just brushing them out. So this is a duo blend style. So I started with the dark, and then I'm using the lighter color to blend out and make kind of a medium color, but also going all the way out to get that same kind of lighter all the way through. But then I'm making that light, that medium color in between. So like I said, this one blends a little better, so you don't have to do a heavy hand for that medium color. So I like how that looks. I think that's a pretty good balance. And then if you want to brighten it up, you can come back in with that R5.3 and give it that depth again in those edges. So this is that duo blending or bicolor blending technique. Just darkening that color back up now that you've made that medium color in between. And it really does, because I like the way it looked before, but now that I'm doing this with that dark again, it really does make the color pop and, like I said, give that deep dimension again. So it just depends on your preference. If you're looking for something a little more realistic, I usually, float towards the whimsical and fun. But if I've got a flower, I usually try to make it look realistic. So it usually depends on the images that I'm coloring on how realistic I like it to be. I'm just rotating this around. We've got plenty of time to get this all blended. It's blending so lovely because it's on that glass media mat. This is very important when you're using alcohol ink markers to color on a glass mat. If you don't have a large one like I have, you can just get a small one, like a travel one, and just make sure what you're coloring is on the glass mat, because it'll make sure that your color's going into the paper and not soaking into something else, and it keeps that moisture, so it allows it to blend before the alcohol evaporates fully. And so then I'm going back in with a V 1.1 because I thought I kind of made a little bit of harsh lines. So I'm just kind of softening it again. And this is that extra step for the duo blend that you don't necessarily have to do. It's just how much of a perfectionist are you? And do you feel like it looks good enough yet? Like that's sometimes the thing with alcohol ink markers is that you can kind of keep going. And so it's actually best sometimes to watch yourself, let it dry and look at it. Because sometimes you can do too much. Too much ink will eventually start messing with your paper too. You know, you'll get ink splotchy look of an oversaturated paper, and then eventually it'll actually start pilling a little bit. Ask me how I know because I couldn't control my alcohol ink flow for a while there. So I was definitely oversaturating my paper. And so we're doing that Y 2.3 and then accenting it with that darker color that's also in the set. And it just gives it that little bit of dimension to use those two different colors there. And then I'm going to go in with the YG 8.7, and this is that darker in there. And there's a reason why this is the botanical set, right? Because that's what this is made for. Beautiful blends, made for some botanicals and perfect for these flowers. Something I also like to do too is add a little extra texture to the inside of your flowers. You can add some glitter like from Winkostella or other type of glitter pens. You can even kind of give it a glisten of some uh, droplets, you know, with some crystal effect or something like that. And then this is the YG 8.5, and I'm doing the same technique as before where we're going over the darker color and pulling out uh, into a medium color while we're also letting that lighter color sit by itself. So I kind of color the whole entire image with the lighter color, and then I start blending out from the darker to kind of make that middle color there. And I'm just continuing to soften the lines as I see it drying a little bit. Make sure I'm getting that medium color that I like. And then now I want to bring in some of these from the Sky and Sea set and see what we can do for a flower combo there. So I'm going to start with a B 2.2. And it's kind of going the exact same way as with this pink flower, doing the exact same technique, the same exact shading, and just rotating around to all of the different petals. And I do love these blues. I don't usually see a blue flower of this kind. I don't know if you have. Usually when I see this kind of bright blue like this, it's like a hydrangea or something like that. But I definitely wanted to give this a go because this is a really beautiful, bold blue tone. When I'm going for a blue, these are the colors I actually go for. The B 2.2 is my favorite. I do like to usually go a little deeper with a B 2.6 and come back to the 2.4 or 2.2, but we are trying to keep it to what everybody has as part of these two sets that we chose. I am a complete set syndrome person. I like to be able to match with all my different papers, so I actually have all the 256 now. So this is the BG 2.1, and as you can see, it's not as good of a match as the pink flower was, but it does actually blend nicely, and it does have that same kind of effect because they are a similar kind of color scheme there that you can use this with that duo blending technique where you can have that dark bluish, but then the flower is going to turn into that BG kind of color, that teal. So actually, I was noticing that I was starting to not be able to be able to blend as well as I should. The nib was kind of sticking, so I had to do a refill on the fly there. And it's really as easy, as you can see, I have the refills on the end of my marker. That's how I complete a full stick of a marker. I always have my refills with me because they're free flow markers, you don't really get a warning. I mean, I do with some of the markers I don't use a ton with, but especially with the lighter colors, I'm usually laying down a lot of ink and then it's kind of empty a little all of a sudden. I can usually push through for the image, but I usually do want to replace it pretty quickly when it starts emptying out. So it's nice to have the refill attached to the marker on the end. And all you have to do, you can see the little tip on the end of the marker I'm using right now on the back end. You just pull that off and flip it around, and I grab the nib right off the other end and shove it in there, and good to go. ready to color again really quickly. So I really do like that it's not a messy refill process. And then this is that same Y2.3 that we were using on the previous flower. I'm just going to keep the same coloring because that looked really nice for the inside of a flower. Kind of a one girl show sometimes with, the centers of my flowers are usually yellow. And then we're gonna add a little bit of a blue essence in there because that's something that I've noticed in some of the blue flowers is that they'll have like the little blue stamen or something like that. So I thought that would be a little fun. So I'm blending that out and giving it just a little bit of a blue hue that goes with the flower. Just gives it a little something different. That's what I do like to do with alcohol inks. If you take a color, you can color that first, and then if you blend a lighter color over it, it will kind of give it that essence and blend that out. And then it gives that the lighter color that tinge of that darker color look. So I'm trying to go a little darker with these leaves this time. This is the G1.8. And I'm just following the lines. I usually just follow the lines on the stamp, use those as a guideline there. And then I usually kind of curve up the sides a little bit, give it a little bit of a soft curvature dimension there. And then we're going to use that YG 8.7. And that kind of gives us a darker look than we were doing earlier. It kind of goes better probably with the blue. I like the lighter leaves with that pink, but this is a fun darker. And then this is the YG 8.5. And that's a lovely tri-blend that's available in that botanical set. All right, and then also, if you don't like how, I know a lot of people will put these through a scan and cut, or maybe you're using a dye for some of your images and you want it to have that white border, you can always use your 0 to come in and bleach that out. All right, so let's try one of these puppies. So this is one of the colors schemes that I wanted to do for the class, but then we weren't going to have the violet shades available. One of the colors wasn't available at the time when we were making the class, so I went with the teal and brown puppy for my class, but this is another favorite that I was coloring on the side as an option. So that's the V2.3. This one's included in the botanical brush set. And I'm following the exact same color scheme as my class, where we're taking the darker color here and coloring all those same areas. If you didn't take the class and you stumbled upon this some other way, we do have a coloring resource of how to do the tri-blending and bi-blending, and it gives you a step-by-step image that shows you this actual coloring that I'm doing right now. I'm just copying it from my class because it's the same image, and then you work your way from there. And so usually with a stamp, I usually kind of color it once, decide how I'm doing it, and that's kind of the way I do it forever. But I will usually change up the colors, but exactly where I shade things usually does not change. So in the V1.1, this is the other color that's in the botanical set. So this one isn't as close as it could be with the V2.3. So I actually usually like to use the V2.1 and then go to the V1.1, because then you have a better tri-blend and you're going to use less of this V1.1 to try to get that mid color here. But as you can see, it's doable. It's just I'm going to use a lot of this V1.1 to be able to establish that medium color. So it just takes a little more of my V1.1 ink. But then again, for this image, you aren't having to buy that third marker. So it just depends on your coloring style, your way of having all of the markers or just some of the markers available to you. It just depends on your style. So I think this image ends up pretty cute. And as I showed in my class, the other option is to use the zero marker as your third color. So if you want to look for something that's a lot more lighter with pastel, then you can use a dark color, a medium color, which would be our 1.1, and then the zero would be your light. And so you would just kind of blend out the harshness of that V2.3 and then have the 1.1 and then have a really light zero that kind of blends out that 1.1 to white essentially. So just kind of softening those little edges, and after I'd already colored all the way out with the 1.1, that's my light color, and now I'm kind of going back over some of those and lightening those edges and making that middle tone. So first I color all of it with the lighter color, and then I come back and blend out that middle tone. And then now I'm going to come back with that V2.3 and add those lovely shadow edges in there. And don't be afraid of accidentally just making it a little too dark or harsh, because like I said, you can always come back in one more time and just soften those edges. And like I said, when you're using the glass media mat, sometimes it's still wet enough depending on how big your image is or how fast you're coloring, and it might actually kind of blend out a little bit on its own. If that lighter color is well saturated, and when you're putting that darker color back over it, it might just kind of blend out a little on its own. So I like adding that little flick right there on the nose bridge just to give it a little dimension there. And then how do I think it's going? Nope, I want to come back in and just soften the edges just a little bit. So I'm not doing this as heavy as when we first came in. I'm just kind of blending out as everything's been drying, giving it that extra little medium feel, and then where those darker harsh lines have kind of been, like just softening it just a little bit. But I want to leave that darkness that we added, so I'm just going right at the edge where the line is and pulling that out to the center. And then just kind of letting that belly have a little bit of a curvature kind of look, the feet have a little bit of a curvature, the arms, because this is supposed to be a little stuffy. So I imagine that it's just like all these stuffed edges, so every bit of it is rounded. So that's why I didn't really go with a light is coming from the left or from the right, to do like a shadow. I did a light's kind of ambient and it's a curved image, so you just want to darken around the edges so that it curves inward. And then I'm going to do the same thing we did in the class, which is a brown spotted pup here. So this is the O4.1, and this is from the Sky and Sea set. And this is the same technique that we've been doing. Just going around, and like I said, to make it look kind of curved, we're kind of going on those edges with the darker color. And this one's going to be a little bit more of a pastel kind of color scheme that lighter brown. So this is the 04.0. If you want to match that darker purple edge that we kind of created, you can even go up to the 4. Let's see, we did a 4.0. I think we're 4.1. You can go up to a 4.3. And then the Sky and Sea set also does go up to the 4.6. But that one's pretty dark too. So it just depends on what you're looking for. So I'm just going back in with that 4.1 to get that nose a little bit darker. And then I thought, you know what, I am going to edge out a little bit, especially like the eye. You kind of want that to look a little more 3D. And then darken up the shadow here underneath those ears. Give a little more curvature here. And it's a pretty cute little stuffed animal pup. All right, then I'm gonna just unharshen some of the lines. Because like I said, like you go in there and add the little darker, then sometimes you can see the lines if it bothers you. Sometimes I like that definition. A little bit of a stark line actually adds the right dimension. So it just depends on your taste, right? What looks good to you. And then I'm kind of seeing a little spot that still had a little bit of white there. So I was just adding the color back in, and I'm going to just blend out a little bit where I see some harsh lines still, because now the purple is all dry. So what it looks like is what it's going to look like forever now. So if you want to touch something out, now is the time. And then I like having those white jelly rolls, and it just depends on how you want to fix things sometimes. So I'm using that 0 to kind of clean up that edge. Because like I said, this is what I was planning on scanning in and sending in for use for the ephemera set. So I wanted to have some nice clean edges there. So depending on the color, like a red is kind of hard. Like it's really hard to lighten the red, but you definitely want to start with a 0 first. And then after you let the 0 dry, you can put a white gel pen on top, and it usually makes it so you can't even tell. And then this is that BG 2.5. I love how dark this is. And this is in that Sea and Sky set. I just love these teals. The BGs, no matter who I'm coloring with, are usually my favorite colors because teal is just one of those things I really enjoy. And so this is one of my go-to colors. And I'm just doing the exact same thing like we did in the class and like I have done with the purple. And we're just doing those dark edges to get that shading in. I think I didn't do the purple all the way across the bottom of the chin. So sometimes I do branch out and do something a little different. I don't have my cheat sheet off to the right. And I get a little brave sometimes after I've colored the image a few times and I start to go off script. So sometimes they look a little different. I don't do exactly the same coloring, but they're pretty close. So just working around the image and getting those edges nice and dark for that curvature. And so I like to do each part. So sometimes like people will do like the arms all the way out to the hand and treat it all as one, but because I feel like the arm is like this stuffed thing with a hand sticking out of it, I kind of kept it as its own thing so that the hand would have a shadow from that curvature of the arm being extra stuffed. And then the hand is kind of sewn onto the end of that. And then this is the BG 2.1. And these are the only 2 BGs that are included in the Sky and Sea set. And as you can see, this is not blending super well. I'm going to make it work, but it's going to take a lot of ink, and it probably would have been better to grab it right when it was really, really wet. I mean, it's still wet because I have it on my glass media mat, but that dark teal, it probably would have been better to do just the face line and then follow in with the BG 2.1. But in the perfect world, you would buy the middle color. So the 2.5 actually has the 2.4 And then there's the 2.3 and then the 2.1. So there are 2 steps in between that we are trying to blend out. So that's why there's such a stark difference here, is because you're missing 2 markers. And really, you don't have to have both. My preference is to use the 2.1 with the 2.3. And then I think you can sometimes get away with going from 2.5 down to the 2.3. But I do like to have that 2.4 to kind of bridge that gap. But definitely going from the 2.5 down to the 2.1 is a pretty big step. But as you can see, you get that stark kind of look. And so as long as you color the shading exactly where you want, and then all you're doing is just lightly softening that line right up against that darker color, then you can still get a good look with it too. But this is definitely probably as far as you're ever going to want to go with the gaps in between your markers. Not everything is solvable. So now you can see I gave up. I was like, you know what? I don't know if this is going to look good, and I want it to look good. So I went and got my BG 2.3. So as you can see, just having the 2.3, and so that's not even the 2.4. So as you can see, like I said, you don't have to have that 2.4. You can actually work with the 2.5 and the 2.3 and then use that 2.1. And that's a beautiful tri-blend that works really well. Just that 2.5 to the 2.1 is just too big of a step to try a dual blend here. And I do like the stark contrast in between here. So I think I'm going to end up coming back with that 1.1 to kind of lighten this like blend back out, but still like this is what I was looking for. And as you can see on the left, we have a duo blend, and then on the right, we have this tri-blend, and you can see that there's just so much more dimension when you have 3 full shades of color. Like even though I am making a mid color when I'm blending 2 together, it's just not as pure of a third color that it stands out. And so I really just do like the difference between how dark you can get and how light you can get when you're using a tri-blend. So you just have that really beautiful depth with tri-blending. And then the one on the left, because our dual blends were nice and close, you have a softer depth that's going on there, that softer blend. And I apologize if you hear my cat. He is looking for his friends right now, so he's wandering around screaming a little bit. And maybe he's going to want to snuggle now, because it is that time of day. All right, I'm just kind of going over with the layers a little bit, just going back and forth. And like I said, you do want to let it, you can see me thinking here, and I'm thinking maybe I should let it dry a little more and then come back, because some of these lines I think might soften as it dries. So something you always want to consider. If you don't like the image, let it dry and come back and see how you think. So now I'm going to come in with this 4.6, and this is another color that's in that sea and sky. I love that they gave you perfectly connected 4 colors in this for the brown. Those are all 4 colors that blend very well together. So these are a lot of my go-to browns. And so you can have this dark 4.6 and then blend down to whatever color you'd like. So for this one, we're going to be darker, and I'll use the tri-blend that steps down from the 4.6 to the 4.3 and down to the 4.1. Sometimes you can skip that 4.1 if you really want to have a drastic jump to a lighter color. Kind of like, just throwing in a 0 in a tri-blend. You can give it a more drastic look with a lot more depth, going from a dark to a really light. So sometimes you can skip some of those lighter colors to give that extra bit of depth there. So we're going in with the next step down, the 4.3. And as you can see, that's blending real nicely. letting us soften that line from the 4.6. I apologize if you hear a cat purring. I'm not sure how the noise cancellation is going to go, but he's right by the mic. And then we're coming in with that lighter color, the 04.1, and just making that curvature kind of look, finishing out the image there. And it's just so much easier if you're using your sky and your sea and sky set. You're just going to notice that it's easier to do these brown blends just because these are made to go together on the color wheel. So if you really like seamless blending, then those browns are going to just work perfectly for you. Whereas those BGs and blues, they do work. Like we showed with the flower, you can take the BG and the blue and blend it. It just looks a little different, and so it just depends on the look that you're going for, right? So I liked the flower with the nature, kind of how a blue could blend to a BG, so it worked well. But with the stuffy, usually material doesn't vary like that. So I felt like it was more realistic to have an actual blend in the actual color scheme. And then this is the V2.3. We're going to do a purple one. So I'm going to show you the blend that I wanted to do that I thought looked a little better. But I mean, like I said, it's all personal preference, right? I think what I ended up using for the class was perfect in every way, but you know, there's always things that personally you like better. So just doing all the same points. So I'm kind of looking at that same image on the left and making sure I'm coloring all the same areas for that depth I already decided on already. And this is what's wonderful when you're trying to do a bunch of cards, right? Just figure out how to color the image and then just color a bunch. Because my hardest thing is trying to figure out my color scheme. That's always what I have the trouble with the most, is getting the color scheme. And once I have the color scheme of the card, then it's easy peasy, right? Then you're just going. So, so I like to do the same color scheme on everything, and then once you figure that out, then you can just really easily just color a bunch of images all at once. And you just do a whole sheet, and then you have a bunch. So even if you're only making one card, always color more, because you know, especially if you're using a scan and cut, there's always an error where it might chop up your image, right, or something like that. Or you made one for somebody like a get well card, and then the whole office is sick, and now you need 5. So you never know when you might need more images. So it's always just better to color a bunch when you can. And then, so I'm going in with the V1.1 on this one, blending that out. It's the exact same thing we did with that first image. Because I believe at this time, when we were solidifying all the plans for this class, we were putting together our own curated list to coincide with the 2 existing sets, and the V2.1 was out of stock. So I chose not to use it on this image because it wasn't going to be available, and we weren't sure if it was going to be back in stock in time. This is always the thing of trying to record ahead, right? Is that you're not quite sure what the state of the world's going to be in when the video goes live. So it's always a little bit of a worry for that. So, all right. And then this pulling back in that V2.3, just like I said, this is exactly what I did for the first image. So we're repeating again here. So if you missed the first image, here's the refresher. And just getting that nice round belly, just like this round belly of this kitty in my lap who's purring right now. He's got a nice round belly. This kitty, his belly is not a trap. If you've ever seen that, where cats roll over and then they attack you when you touch their belly. Not this one. He loves his belly rubbed. He is just having a ball because I'm sitting in place for so long. I don't mean my hands because I'm not actually coloring. I'm doing the voiceover afterwards. So now that turquoise, I saw it for that other one and I was like, you know what? This actually might be fun to do a purple and turquoise. Because, I mean, if you have a little stuffed animal, it doesn't have to look realistic, right? So I did the purple one, and then now I'm like, why does it have to have brown spots? We could have turquoise spots. So I'm really liking how this looks. This is going to be fun. This is a nice stuffed animal I wish I had. It definitely gives me, oh, what was that? It was in the Dumbo movie where they have all like the weird kind of stuffed animal kind of dream or whatever. I feel like this little stuffy belongs in the bubbles, right? They were all like made of bubbles and stuff. They kind of look like stuffed animal bubble characters. I feel like this belongs in that scene. And especially the way I'm coloring him, he definitely belongs in that scene. The purples and teals were great for that. So I'm just taking that BG 2.1 and blending that out. And this is that one that, in my opinion, if you got this Sky and Sea set, you got the 2.1, but you really need the color I was just using, which was the 2.3, because that is what is complementing those V colors that you had earlier. Like this is all the same kind of tone, that same richness and darkness for this image. If you want to combine the purples and the teals, now you have something that's comparable. Like if we tried to use that 2.5 with the one with the 2.1, it would have been just way too dark and would have been really awkward looking spots. And I kind of colored the teal over the purple a little bit. And so what you can do is you can take your lighter color, because it's going to kind of act a little bit like a 0, but with a little bit of color, and it actually kind of bleaches it back out and deposits its own color back. So now we're going to do one of these flower vase images, and I'm using the BG 2.1 because I'm trying to make it look like there's the water in there, but it's also a clear glass. So when you're looking at glass from the side, you're kind of looking through two parts of the glass, right? Like a really thick part of the glass because you're looking at the edge kind of overlapping on itself. So I was kind of trying to give it that look that natural glass looks like, where it's real like a darker blue around the edge. And then as it bows out towards you, you don't have as much glass on glass look. And then it blends out to the clear water in between. And then I'm trying to decide what I want to do with these flowers. So I'm going to use the YG 8.7. I liked the way those leaves looked on our previous flower images, so I'm going to go back in with that same look. And I'm just going to do all of them this way. I do recognize that in a bouquet, usually the greens all kind of look a little different, and so I probably should have mixed and matched the YGs a little bit. And I think that's what I might do. I did leave a couple of these, and then we'll try to do something different with those so it's not all the same green for all the foliage. And so we're using that YG 8.5. I do like that botanical set does have those two YGs that are really close to each other that you can blend very nicely. And then even that G 1.8 actually blends very well with that darker YG, so it works out very nice. It's a really good combination there. So then I'm trying to make some darker leaves in there just to give it a little bit like I said, of a contrast and kind of that natural look of a bouquet is not going to have all the same colored greens unless it's all the same flowers, which of course this is not because there's different shaped leaves. So there's a few different variations in there, so we should do them slightly different colors. So this is giving that realistic look. And like I said, this blends really well with that YG 8.7. Gives you a nice dark blend to coincide with that lighter blend. So that's something too, if you want to broaden, like stretch your markers that you have, just buy like one color that connects the other ones that you have, so that you can kind of go left a little bit in a blend and then also right a little bit in a blend, and then you also have the middle blend. Instead of just buying two separate markers over here, two separate markers over here on the color wheel, maybe try to buy a few that are next to each other so you can have a bunch of different looks. And then this is that R 5.5. This is one of the ones we were thinking of playing with earlier, but this is kind of what it's meant to do. You've got the R 5.5 and it should blend to the R 5.3. And before I was actually using the R 5.3 and blending out to the violet. So this is actually the R blend, the duo blend that it's meant to do with the 5.5 to the 5.3. And they blend really nice, give a nice soft look. And so, like I showed you though on that flower to the left, you can go to a lighter shade by using the 5.3 as your dark and then going down to the lighter one from the violet. And then I was just trying to give it a little bit of a yellow center. I colored over it a little bit with the red. So it actually works better to use a lighter yellow when you do that, because then it does like what I said earlier, where it kind of bleaches with the lighter color and then it lays down its color with it. So if I wanted to actually have that flower center pop, it'd be better to do it with a lighter yellow than what we have in this set, because the darker yellow that came in this set is going to want to just more blend with those pinks and reds than actually replace the color. And then, so I'm doing the exact same thing we did with that flower on the left, using that V 1.1 to give it a softer one. And so it's kind of nice, like it's got two coupled flowers that are of the same shade, of that same family kind of color. So I think that looks nice for a bouquet to have like matching feel of the color schemes of flowers. And then for this one, I'm thinking of just having a more stark vase color. And so this is kind of like one of those vases that has that, I don't know what you call it, where it's like the older glass that's more blue. So this is like, I'm grabbing that glass that's out from under my cabinet that I got from my grandmother's house. That's that like kind of old style glass where it's extra blue, where it overlaps. And then I'm taking that BG 2.1 and kind of softening it here. And I really like the blend that it creates. And then I'm using that 0 as our third color here to kind of soften it. So I'm pulling out from that dark blue to give it a better blend and soften that BG connection there. That's another tactic you can do for your blends. You can soften that blend line by pulling out that dark blue into the BG. And what I'm trying to do where it doesn't have the water, I'm lightening it even more so that the water is providing a little more blue where it actually is behind the glass. And then we're going to do some violet flowers for this one to go with that bold blue. So this is that V 2.3. And I'm doing the exact same shading. Once I've decided where the color goes in the previous image, I'm just copying it again. And I'm just gonna keep doing it, getting in the shaded spots. Getting in those folds of the flower. I forgot that one spot. I'll go back to it. And then I'm trying to figure out what I want to do. How light do I want to go? Yeah, I think I'm just going to use the V1.1. Because I think that blends real nice for a lovely flower here. Very beautiful with that blue and BG vase. And then we're just going to add the spot I missed. And then I want to try something on this one. I'm going to do the violet again. Get this V 2.3. And see if we can give it a little bit of a different look here. So I brought it right to the edge on some of those petals, and then I'm going to have that V1.1. So I've got really dark centers, and it gives it just a kind of different look, like it's a darker flower, but really I used the exact same coloring. So it just sometimes depends on how far, especially with a smaller image, how far you pull out your dark color and then blend out that light. And then I wanted that center to be real dark, so I just decided to do all of it that V.3, 2.3. And then I was careful this time, and I made sure not to get the color in the center, so now you can kind of see that yellow in there. And then we're going to come in here. I wanted the lighter green to start with on this one. So we're going to do that lighter blend and see how this is going to look. And because I kept with the same purple scheme, I decided to just go ahead and keep with the same green and not do two different tones of green. So now you can kind of see like what the difference is with the image above. We've got the lighter leaves and then mixed with the darker leaves. And then on this one, I'm actually going to use the lighter and then blend it out with a 0. So it gives it that more of a glossy kind of look to me where, you know, they're a little waxy. They've got that sheen where they're catching the light and they kind of go to that white kind of look. So I really like how this came out, even though they're all the same, because you could do this on a few of them and then also do a darker technique on a couple of them, just like I said, to give some depth to the bouquet, but I really like how this came out. And I'm just trying to, again, accent that right flower to be a little lighter, so there's a lot more difference between the two flowers. So I was going over that again with the 0 now that it's dry. And then I thought these lines were a little too harsh, so now I'm going back in with that V1.1 to just soften those edges. And it kind of darkens those tips a little bit because you're adding a little more color with that V1.1 going back over it again. And so yeah, so now that flower looks a little lighter on the right, and then the flower on the left looks a little darker. And I think I want to make it just a little darker in the center. Now that it's dry, you're just adding some pigment so you can actually make that center darker. So that's awesome. Like if you want to add like a lighter or a darker element, always wait until it's dry, and then it has packs a little more punch. So then here I'm going to do some hair coloring, which I'm not super stellar at, which is why I'm not the one teaching the hair coloring. You want to catch that class if you want to know more about hair coloring. But I do know the general techniques, and maybe I'll get better after I take the class with you guys. And so this is that YO 2.3. I thought we would make a very lemony blonde for this one. And so I start with pretty dark roots, blend out a little around the edges, and I like to follow the lines of the stamp. And that front piece, I was kind of trying to give it a kind of look of a curved flop of hair in the front there. So I gave it some extra dimension, like it's going to be a curved piece of hair. And then I gave it some shadowing around the bottoms. And now I decided to come in with O 4.3 And this one is one of our extra colors that we picked for the collection. And this gives that extra little darkness that we want to maybe blend in. So this is where I was wondering, I think I'd like to have a little bit of a dirty blonde, I feel like this looks like. And then we're going to pull out and have the golden kind of look where the bend of the hair is. And so it'll come in and have a lighter bit on the curvature areas there. And then I'm going to highlight it a little bit with the 04.1. So bringing in a little bit of that kind of tan coloring with the blonde. So this is definitely now turning out to be more of a dirty blonde, which I guess, you know, you kind of subconsciously sometimes emulate yourself. And so this is the type of hair color I was used to looking at in the mirror for a while there before I started coloring my hair purple. I had the dirty blonde. This is where my eyes kind of go with my self-conscious, I guess. So then I'm trying to give it a little bit of light and blend out with that 04.0. And that's from our Sky and Sea set, our complete O set there. There was 4 really nice O's, and they're also nice for skin tones. So this is that 04.0. I'm giving her a little bit of edges around there for a little bit of a tan with her skin tone, and then blend that out. Apologize if I end up sneezing. I've been petting a cat in my lap for a while, and there's a little bit of fur that's floating up towards my nose. Okay, so then I decided that the 04.0 was not dark enough. I wanted to give her a little bit darker skin tone, so I went in with that 4.1, and then I'm going to blend that out with the 4.0. And kind of blend that out to the white a little bit. And then if she gets a little too dark with the skin tone, you can always come in with a 0 and soften it up a little bit too. I just wasn't sure with the yellow hair how tanned or how or how light I wanted her to be to go with it. All right, and now I'm gonna just kind of lighten up where I thought she got a little too dark, especially like around the eyes and the cheeks. Like I don't really have that kind of dimension where it looks like her face is kind of curving a little bit. So I'm just lightening up with the 0 right there. And then I'm just gonna blend out just a little bit to give it that complete look again with that 4.0. I feel like this cat just keeps getting louder. So it'll be interesting to find out if you end up being able to hear it. Otherwise, you're just going to think I'm crazy talking about how there's a cat purring in my lap and you can't hear anything. All right, so then just like some of the images above, I thought we'd do a little purple dress with some shoes, and I'm treating it as a 2-part, so it's not really a dress, it's a shirt with a skirt. That's what I decided to go with. So I've got some matching shoes. I realized I didn't color like the tops of her feet because I'm treating her legs like the ankle. It's not like a line for the shoe. It's more like the bend of her leg at the joint of the ankle. So I decided that's the top of her foot. But really it could be the top of the shoe too. And then we're just blending with that V 1.1. So that's a cute little top with some cute pink shoes or purple shoes. I'm just going to darken again because we're doing this as a duo blend. Just trying to keep those shadows, give those shoes a little dimension. And then what shall we do for the skirt? Oh, you guessed it, teal. So the folds I'm doing with that 2.5, and then I decided I want to also kind of come in a little more and give it a little more depth. So I'm going to come in on the curves and then also pull up the lines a little more at those folds is what I'm going to do to give it a little more dimension. I guess she'd have a little bit of shadow here where her arms are, around the hips. And then this is that BG 2.3 that's kind of a must with these two colors. If you got the Sky and Sea set, you do want to invest in getting the BG 2.3 is my recommendation. And so I'm just trying to give it a little bit of a kind of big curvature feel. So kind of feeling like the edges of those skirts kind of curl upward a little bit and kind of have a lot of volume here. So I'm giving them a lighter puff out kind of look. So that BG 2.1 kind of gives it that little look of it's puffing out at that midpoint there. And then these are still kind of harsh lines with that 2.5, so I was just going to pull it out a little more. And then, like I said earlier, I'm going to pull it up and make those folds kind of accentuate a little bit. So we end up with a more wavy kind of look to the skirt. And then I decided to give her a little bit of an R5.3 little pink nose and then the little cheeks, but it was a little too light, so now I'm coming back in and giving a little spots with the dark, and then I'm going to come back in with the lighter 4.0 to kind of blend that out, and it blends that darker pink kind of color out to that skin tone. So that's a good technique with the skin tones to add a pink and then kind of pull it out to the skin tone. So for this one, I'm going to do a brown hair, which is now a lot more closer to my natural color because I got darker with age. When I was a younger kid, it was more dirty blonde, and now it's a darker brown. Except when I bleach it and put the purple in. So we're using that 4.6 from the Sky and Sea. So this is that darker color that it comes with. And I'm giving it that kind of curvature there of where the lighter color will kind of shine. And then it will be a little lighter along the tips. So I'm just kind of coloring the shadowed edges there and then letting it be a little lighter at the ends too. So I have a spot that's going to have like that curvature kind of shine to that really, really healthy model hair, you know, where it has that shine edge to it. And then the tips usually have a little bit lighter where it kind of curls up at the ends. So that's what the effect I'm kind of going for here. So I'm taking that dark color and then just really harshening, blending out that harsh line with the 4.3 and then leaving a little white still so we can go a little bit lighter. And then always using those flicks to kind of mix those colors up. And then with 4.0, we're just going to go kind of roughly over all the colors and help them blend out. Sometimes if you don't like how dark the darker color is, you can just color the entire thing over and it'll blend and kind of lighten everywhere you're touching. So that's kind of nice. A little double tap there. And I think it came out pretty good. Could blend out a little bit more around the edges. Might let this dry and come back to it, or we might try to soften a little bit more. Yeah, I'll think about it. It might actually help to darken it a little more. That'll help too with the look of the blend. So adding in that dark before it gets all dry gives it that little stark contrast, the edge. So sometimes, like, as long as you're not laying down a ton of ink with how you're coloring, I did lay down a lot of ink when I first started with OLOs because they flow differently than other markers that are using the foam insert, right? So the free flow markers, it does flow a little faster. So I have learned to have a little less contact with the brush nib so that it's not just applying a ton. But what I like to do, as long as I'm a light-handed color, I'll go back with a dark, go to medium to light. If it's not dark enough, I'll go back again and do a dark, medium to light to still blend. And so as long as you're not laying down a ton of ink, you can go over it a couple times like that. And especially if you let it dry in between, you'll get that extra. And so now I'm doing that same look with the 4.1 to the 4.0, giving a little bit of dimension around the edges, curvature of the face, give a little bridge of a nose in there. And then I'm going to color her the same with the arms and the legs, and that's the top of her foot, not the top of the shoe. And then what are we going to do about the outfit? Let's see, what color do we want to try this time? I think I'm going to use the R5.5 for the skirt here. And so I'm going to do the exact same thing I did before. I'm pulling up a little bit more than I did with the BG 2.5. I'm pulling up with this R5.5 a little more up the skirt to give it more dimension of those folds. And this is part of that botanical set. So giving it a nice stark edge, and then we're going to come in with that 5.3. Totally meant to blend with this perfectly, and then blending that out real nicely and giving it a little bit of extra dimension look where it's got like a fluffy skirt going on here. And then, as we showed works with the flower, we can use a tri-blend would be with the V1.1. So it goes from a red to a violet, and I think that actually looks really lovely. So that's basically how you could have colored the flower. You could have done the R 5.5 to the 5.3 to the V1.1 and had a tri-blend for that flower. So that's something you can give a try. And then I really do like this kind of rose look bottom with the green top. So I'm using that YG 8.5 and then blending it out with that. Love this. This is looking really nice. Sorry, and I just realized I kind of dropped off. But yeah, I don't have a lighter green that came with this, so I was going to try this with the 0 and see how well we can blend this out with a duo blend with the 0, but it's not making it light enough. But we can come in with that 8.5 now, and then it helps us make that third color doing that. So as I lightened it and pulled it out as a middle color, then I came back over with the 8.5. And then now I'm going to darken it with the 8.7. So using that 0 kind of gave us a little bit of a lighter edge, and then we came over it with the 8.5, and then now I'm just going to go backwards and start with that 8.7. In reality, I probably should have started with the 8.7, gone to the 8.5, and then tried to do a little bit with the 0 at the end, but it's always fun trying to figure out what color you're looking for, what looks nice, and I'm usually able to fix it. The markers are pretty forgiving on what you want. So yeah, if I want this lighter, I could go over it with the 0. Now that I've got all the color down that I want, now I can come in and just make it lighter with that 0. And I love how that tone is coming out with that little bit of lightness now. Exactly what I was going for. And I don't have to have the next step down from the 8.5. Because there is an 8.3 and an 8.2 for that YG line. So you can have a nice ladder of blends there. And so I'm doing the same technique I did before because I liked the way the little cheeks were. So I'm just softening that pink with that 04.0. And then if you ever color over into the eyeballs, a white gel pen is an easy fix to correct any of your overcoloring. And sometimes it makes it, come out a little brighter. So this is my samples, and I hope you enjoyed it. See you next time. Bye.